Another day of delays and frustration for thousands of people travelling by coach to the continent through Dover. Some have had to wait 24 hours, others longer, before finally making their onward journeys.
I've got mostly elderly passengers on that paid good money for a holiday, and basically I think some of them now want to go home.
The port hopes the backlog will be cleared by the end of the day. Also on the programme, the Home Secretary insists Rwanda is a safe country to send migrants to, despite 12 refugees being shot dead there by police in 2018. School bosses say Ofsted inspectors must take into account the effects of the pandemic, especially in poorer areas. Just a day after being discharged from hospital, Pope Francis leads Mass on Palm Sunday.
And there's contact! Carlos Sainz!
And at a drama-filled Australian Grand Prix, Max Verstappen wins again, just ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Good afternoon. It's been another day of delays at the port of Dover for thousands of people travelling by coach to the continent. Some have reported waiting up to 24 hours before being able to make their onward journeys. It's hoped the backlog will be cleared by the end of the day. Here's Mark Ashdown.
Inch by inch, things are slowly moving at the port of Dover, but coachloads of school children destined for Easter breaks have faced lengthy delays.
We got here down into the queue at around about 2:30 this morning. We were about 33rd in the queue, and we're now down to 31st, and we reckon we've probably got another 12 hours left waiting.
This group are en route to Luxembourg, but have been queuing since yesterday.
I've got mostly elderly passengers on that paid good money for a holiday, and basically I think some of them now want to go home.
Now the blame game has begun. The Port of Dover said ferry companies accepted extra Easter bookings, which added pressure to the system. The companies said they've shared all booking information in advance and have laid on extra crossings overnight to help get things moving. The port is also blaming French border processes. Since the UK left the EU, there's no longer freedom of movement to the continent, so passport checks are much more rigorous, and they happen here on English soil. So when you've got, say, a coachload of 80 school children, every single person has to get off, have their passport examined and stamped. Freight traffic and cars haven't been affected. The Home Secretary said the delays are not down to Brexit.
They've seen an acute pressure of bookings, of coaches and journeys across the Channel. It is a very busy time of year. There's been some bad weather, but they've been putting on extra journeys overnight.
Last summer there were huge queues at the start of the school holidays, and the Christmas getaway saw problems because of strikes. How then to prevent a repeat in future?
I can imagine that ministers are going to call in the Port of Dover, the ferry companies, and say, right, we can't have this again. So therefore, there will be mandated capacity limits, which will be carefully worked out by the port, by the ferry companies, so that they know that they can cope.
There will be an early test of resilience in a few days' time, with large numbers expected to travel over the Easter bank holiday. Yeah, well, things have eased off considerably now, but these coaches behind me are still facing, we understand, a 2 to 4 hour wait before they get on their ferries. And there are many more parked up just outside Dover and lorry parks and service stations waiting their turn. Now, we understand they've processed about 300 coaches over the past 24 hours, and things should ease off by this evening. Then the race is on to understand what went wrong ahead of the busy Easter getaway.
OK, Mark, thank you. Mark Ashdown there, live at the Port of Dover. The Home Secretary insists asylum seekers who've arrived in the UK will be safe in Rwanda if they're deported as part of the government's new migration strategy, but it remains unclear when the scheme will be up and running. Opposition parties have criticised the cost and feasibility of the plans. Our political correspondent Ione Wells reports.
This is the Home Secretary stepping off a plane in Rwanda 2 weeks ago. The first plane due to take asylum seekers here from the UK last summer never even took off. The government want to send asylum seekers here if they cross the Channel in small boats. The plans are still facing a legal challenge. Ministers can't commit to when they will stop the boats. and insist Rwanda is a safe country. The United Nations Refugee Agency has evidence 12 Congolese refugees there were shot dead during protests in 2018. The BBC has verified the location and the date at which that happened. The Rwandan government says it was a last resort and there was violence at the protest. Suella Braverman was confronted with this footage of what happened in the aftermath of that protest.
Well, as I said, that might be 2018. We're looking at 2023 and beyond. The High Court, senior expert judges have looked into the detail of our arrangement with Rwanda and found it to be a safe country and found our arrangements to be lawful. I think we're on strong ground to say that Rwanda is a safe country. It is the right solution for us grappling with our small boats problem.
Opposition parties are not convinced the Rwanda plan will ever happen.
I think this is a con trick being perpetrated on the British people. The government is not processing asylum claims. They've got an enormous backlog. They've added £500 million to the costs because of these delays that have been caused by them pursuing all these new strategies, barges that don't exist, claims to send people to Rwanda that haven't materialised.
The Liberal Democrats said Ms Braverman's comments show the Rwanda plan is unworkable and on hold. The number of migrants crossing the Channel hit a record high last year.
It will result in their detention.
The Prime Minister has pledged to stop the boats, but he and his party know this is a political risk. They're aware if they fail, voters could make that disappointment known at the next election. Ione Wells, BBC News.
2 British men detained by the Taliban in Afghanistan have been able to speak with their families for the first time since being arrested in January. Another man is also being detained. The Foreign Office says it's working to secure consular contact with the British nationals and is supporting their families. Yetunde Yusuf has that story.
Back under Taliban control since the summer of 2021. Now it's emerged that 3 British men are being held in custody by the Taliban in Afghanistan.
So maybe I might be evacuated tonight, maybe next week, maybe a month.
It's understood one of them is Miles Routledge, who had to be evacuated in the final days of the occupation in 2021. He's gained a social media following, visiting countries deemed dangerous by the authorities. 2 other British men have also been arrested. Kevin Cornwall, a 53-year-old charity worker and paramedic, and another man who hasn't been named. The organisations supporting the families of the 2 men say after 3 months they finally had contact.
We're not really talking about a hostage situation. We have controlled language. They were able to discuss personal matters, able to confirm the health and well-being of the individuals. And this is really the first time that we've seen this in any of this style of detentions. So it's also an enormous diplomatic step forwards.
Meanwhile, the Home Secretary says people should be cautious about travelling to dangerous countries.
If there are risks to people's safety, if they're a British citizen abroad, then the UK government is going to do whatever it takes to ensure that they're safe.
The Presidium network say negotiations are still underway and that there's hope for a positive outcome. Yetunde Yusuf, BBC News.
The chief executives of more than 200 academy schools in England say the regulator, Ofsted, must rethink how it carries out inspections. They've told the BBC Ofsted fails to take into account the effect the pandemic has had on schools serving poorer communities. It follows the death of a head teacher who took her own life after her school was downgraded. Here's our education editor, Branwen Jeffries.
Music is important at this London primary school, but 2 Ofsted inspections in the last year have struck a note of discord.
It's been a year like no other.
On a visit a year ago, inspectors raised concerns. They'd heard racist, sexist and homophobic language in the playground and wanted better record keeping on child safety. The head teacher was told the school would go from good to inadequate.
I went walking for about 5 hours before I could find the strength to return home and face people again.
It was 5 months until the report was published in September.
I wasn't sleeping. I was always anxious. I had lost my confidence. You have to be seen to be resilient and strong and confident. But internally, every essence of your being has been eroded.
2 months after that first report, different inspectors were back. The school had made a few changes. At the end of term, it was judged good again. Ofsted has a legal duty to inspect all state schools, checking that children are safe, happy and get the education they need. I've been speaking to people who between them run hundreds of schools across England. They share similar concerns about Ofsted. They told me the way inspections are carried out is too rigid, and that one grade that is awarded at the end doesn't give parents the full picture of what's going on. This Nottingham school is part of a group of 38 academies. The chief executive says Ofsted isn't taking account of the impact of the pandemic, and many others share his view.
I think that there is an issue, particularly for disadvantaged communities and schools that serve disadvantaged communities, how fair their experience is when Ofsted are looking for things that are becoming increasingly challenging for any school to deliver.
Ofsted said it recognised the challenges schools face, adding there is a legitimate debate about how schools are graded. Bronwyn Jeffries, BBC News.
Pope Francis has led Palm Sunday Mass at the Vatican just a day after being discharged from hospital following treatment for bronchitis. The pontiff, who's 86, appeared before worshippers in St. Peter's Square at the start of one of the busiest weeks in the Christian calendar. Our Europe correspondent Jenny Hill has that story.
There was a determination about Pope Francis this morning, a desire, perhaps, to get back to work. But just a day after he left hospital, he cut a rather frail figure. His voice, at times rather hoarse, as he led the Palm Sunday Mass.
I thank you for joining me and also for your prayers, which intensified in recent days. I truly thank you.
For worshippers here, a prayer answered. It's the most important time of the church year, and Pope Francis is now expected to preside over a gruelling schedule of Easter services. But his hospital stay has intensified speculation about his longer-term future. Pope Francis has indicated repeatedly that he would stand down were his health to fail him. He's 86 years old, he has a number of significant health complaints, and many here wonder whether that time might come sooner rather than later. For now, celebration. The Pope clearly delighted to be back amongst his people, reassuring the faithful of his devotion. Jenny Hill, BBC News, Rome.
With all the sport now, here's Hugh Ferris at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi there, Hugh.
Hello, Clive. Max Verstappen won the Australian Grand Prix, but the world champion controlling another Formula One race was the only unsurprising thing that happened in Melbourne. Behind him, Lewis Hamilton finished second amid a good deal of disarray. Ben Croucher reports.
On Sunday, down under, F1 turned topsy-turvy.
It's lights out and away we go.
To win, you need a healthy mix of luck and skill. George Russell had loads of the latter to take an early lead, but behind, the luck for Leclerc ran out by turn 3. The grip for Alex Albon ran out a few laps later in a start categorised by chaos and crashes, although the subsequent red flag dropped Russell down to 7th. On the restart, Max Verstappen was running red hot to hit the front and scamper off into the distance. The Dutchman maybe not as warm as Russell, whose luck was extinguished in a flicker of flames. Near the end, another red flag, another restart, more carnage, 3 separate incidents, both Alpines taking each other out. Nobody could quite fathom it. The leaders avoided it all. Sometimes better lucky.
Verstappen wins.
Better in Verstappen's case, that you're also still very, very good. Ben Croucher, BBC News.
England have recorded another comfortable victory in the Women's Six Nations to go back to the top of the table. They scored 12 tries in a 68-5 win over Italy. Nesta McGregor has more.
Currently ranked #1 in the world and on a 20-game win streak, respectfully, how many points would England score was the only uncertainty surrounding this match.
Italy, ready?
It wouldn't take too long to find out. 2 minutes in, the Italian defence breached by Jess Breach. In the last 4 matches between these two sides, Italy hadn't even scored a try. So when Sarah Tonesi forced her way over the goal line, they were breaking new ground. The joy wouldn't last though. As the Red Roses settled and found their groove, their domination and lead began to increase.
And it's McDonald who goes over. She's going to get the bonus point try.
The second half provided much of the same. Abby Dow a clear standout, scoring 4 of England's 12 tries. And when newly crowned captain Myrie added her name to the score sheet for a second time, England extended their win streak. Facing Wales in 2 weeks should be more of a threat though to that 21-game run. Nesta McGregor, BBC News.
West Ham have picked up a crucial victory in the meeting of the Premier League's bottom 2 teams. Their 1-0 win over Southampton takes them out of the relegation zone. Moroccan Naif Aguerd with the only goal. Southampton stay at the foot of the table. Celtic have restored their 9-point lead at the top of the Scottish Premiership with a 2-0 win at Ross County. The goals came just before half-time and just before the end. Alexandra Bernabei sealing the victory in the 95th minute. The thrilling Women's Super League title race has taken another twist, with Arsenal beating Manchester City to go above them into second in the table. They conceded an early goal but came back to win 2-1. Katie McCabe with the decisive contribution. Arsenal are 3 points behind leaders Manchester United. There is more at our website, including the news that Brendan Rodgers has been sacked by Leicester, with the team in the Premier League's bottom 3. But that is all the sport for now. Clive.
OK, Hugh, thank you. Hugh Ferris there. That's it. I'll be back with the news at 10. Now on BBC One. Time for the news where you are. Bye for now.